All right, we're on the part of our study in Daniel 70 weeks about the coming prince, and so far, let me look back here. So far, we've covered the captivity. We've covered the confession, Daniel's confession that's there in Daniel chapter 9. We've covered the commandment to go back and rebuild the wall and the city. And we covered just briefly the cutting off of the Messiah. And to me, all this is pretty evident on the chart. And it all fits. You know, if you have the decree to go back and rebuild at 450, 483 years later, or 69 weeks of years, 33 AD, the Messiah is cut off. I think that's pretty clear. There may be some that might have a different interpretation of that, and they're welcome to have it. I think what happens is if you try to change that and make that anything but 69 weeks, you're going to run into more questions than you do answers. So this far we're okay. It's from this point on that it's really going to get challenging because it's obvious here in 2015, or whatever the calendar date, proper date is, that something happened and God stopped this timetable. We need to know when He stopped it, why He stopped it, when will it start up again, before we can have a better understanding of how this thing unfolds the rest of the way. So we need to look at some things that happened after this cutting off. Now, before I insert my foot into my mouth and say something that I can't back up this morning, I won't say it. But we need to look forward here in a little bit of time here to the destruction of Jerusalem, and that's why under the coming prince, we're going to discuss that a little bit. I think I could show her quicker than. Foot and mouth disease. There's. That's okay. That's okay. I never could understand some of the idiom over there in Romania. They had one where somebody was stingy. They called scratch the cheese, and that was someone who was a miser. You know, I never did. What's that mean? Scratch the cheese. You know, just I guess because you just a little. You know, I don't know. It's amazing how folks have different stuff. You know, and I'm sure they have something equivalent, you know. All right. Look at verse 26 and 27 of Daniel chapter 9. And I should be over there, and I'm not. Daniel chapter 9, verse 26 and verse 27. And he says there, and after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself, and the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. You see, we already have a statement here that the city and the sanctuary is going to be destroyed. Well, what happened in 70 AD where the city and the sanctuary were destroyed fits, but not completely. And it says, and the end thereof shall be with a flood, and unto the end of the war desolations are determined. You find that flood and those wars in the book of Revelation, and they're primarily happening in the last 3.5 years. So, not that there couldn't be some wars that kind of precede that last 3.5 years, but I think that's the majority of what's happening is happening in the last 42 months. But we have this destruction, and we got to talk about that because the problem with the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD is it's outside of our timeline. If this timeline would have run its course by 40 AD, it'd have been over with. We'd be running around if we were born, we'd be running around New Jerusalem, you know, and having a good time. We'd already be through the millennium and everything, but this is outside that timeline. And what this is going to be is going to be another type or example or precursor to what's coming. It's like you have 18 types of the Antichrist in the Bible, but that's not where it stops. There's types of the Antichrist even in church history. Let's see, how about Doc uses Moshe, is it Moshe Dayan? Wore a patch over the right eye. He was a Jewish general. Adolf Hitler is a good example of a type of the Antichrist. Probably some people thought he was, but he wasn't, but he's a good type of one. The extermination of the Jews and all that kind of thing, the hatred he had for them, the fact that he wanted to have a third Reich, which is a third reign, a millennial reign. He actually even wanted to go through the, is it the Eastern Gate? I think he even purposed to go through the Eastern Gate of Jerusalem. He never made it, of course. And there are probably others that, through our church history, there are examples of, I think Napoleon would be another one, are examples of types of the Antichrist. Well, this is just another example of what's coming. And the Lord knew. Listen, if the Lord didn't know, then why did He choose to create the world in six days and 6 nights and rest on the 7th? If He didn't know how long this thing was going to last, then why would He have done that? He knew. And I think when the Lord showed up, He knew there was going to be a separation between His first coming and His second coming. But here's the thing. The offer has to be legitimate. The offer has to be legitimate. When He says the kingdom of heaven's at hand, the offer has to be there that it's at hand. That if that Jew accepts their Messiah, man, they're within 7 years of bringing in the kingdom. So, let's talk a little bit about the city being destroyed in 70 A.D. by Rome. Here's some problems with it. The son of perdition is dead, and his body is destroyed. Now look with me at John 17:12. See, even the devil didn't arrive late at this party. He shows up on time with his man. John 17:12. While I was with them in the world, I kept them in thy name. Those that thou gavest me I have kept, and none of them is lost, but the son of perdition, that the scripture might be fulfilled. And the only one he lost was who? Judas Iscariot. He said, have I not chosen you 12, and one of you is a devil? So we have, the son of perdition is the Antichrist. Or at least the spirit of Antichrist. He's present. He's there. Look at Acts chapter 1, verse 18. It says, now this man purchased a field with the reward of iniquity, and falling headlong, he burst asunder in the midst, and all his bowels gushed out. Kind of PG-13 there. You see what happened? Well, see, I know folks think that, Judas was really all bummed out because of what he did, and he just felt so bad that he went there and tried to undo the damage he did. I don't believe that. I don't believe that for a second. I believe that everything that Judas did was calculated because he is the son of perdition. He is a devil. He's not a man. He's not some disciple that's all teary-eyed about what he just did. He found out that what he thought was going to happen wasn't going to happen. When those 12 legions didn't get called down, all of a sudden Judas does an about-face. He runs back to the priest, and said, I've betrayed the innocent blood and all this stuff. Like he didn't know he did it in the first place. Throws down the money, But how you know something's amiss is, what does he do? He goes and hangs himself. Why does Judas hang himself? Is it maybe because the man Christ Jesus is about to be hung on a cross and crucified? Jesus Christ came up 3 days later. How much you want to bet Judas was going to be climbing that rope after 3 days? Now you can think what you want. But there's a reason God shook that body loose and destroyed it. So he couldn't climb back up that rope. They say it would have been Judas, the devil incarnate. All the man of sin is the body. The son of perdition is the spirit of Judas Iscariot going into it, and the soul of Satan, or Satan himself, entering into it, and becomes an unholy trinity. I mean, you say, well, the other question to this is even in the book of Acts, we have the preaching of the kingdom. If they would have accepted, who would have fulfilled the role? Well, I can think of one. The Pontifex Maximus. And that's not the Pope, that's the Roman Emperor. But the Pope claims the same name. Nothing's changed, man. Look with me over in the book of Acts. Look at Acts chapter 1. And I don't want to get ahead of myself too far here, but Acts chapter 1. No. Yeah, Acts chapter 1. And I know I'm throwing up a bunch of what ifs. I'm just trying to get your mindset that even though Judas is destroyed, the devil's not left without options. He has a demigod. He has someone that claims to be a god among men, who is the high priest of the Mystery Babylon religion. And that's the Roman Caesar. But look with here in Acts chapter 1, look at verse 9 to 11. And when he had spoken these things, while they beheld, he was taken up, and a cloud received him out of their sight. And while they looked steadfastly toward heaven as he went up, behold, two men stood by them in white apparel, which also said, Ye men of Galilee, why stand ye gazing up into heaven? This same Jesus, which is taken up from you into heaven, shall so come in like manner as you have seen him go into heaven. Now, when you think about that verse, the first thing that comes to mind is, well, he left bodily, he returned bodily, and that's good, but there's some other things. When he left, who was in power? Rome was in power. When he comes back, guess who's in power? Same Pontifex Maximus. Oh, it went from military to religious, but same head. Rome will be in charge, of course, and when he left, the Jew was in the land, wasn't he? Is the Jew back in the land? So it's going to fit. And it says there in the, let's turn over to, we're just going to look at one gospel account of this, but there are actually three. Look in Luke chapter 21 when we're talking about the destruction of Jerusalem. It's obvious that God has made a break in that timeline. He has stopped it. But the fulfilling of that prophecy that he gives them here comes to pass word for word. Word for word. Not word for Daniel, but word for what Jesus Christ said. And he separates the two. Here's one to show you. Look at Luke 21, verse 5 and 6. It says, And as some spake of the temple, and how it was adorned with goodly stones and gifts, he said, As for these things which ye behold, the days will come in the which there shall not be left one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. Referring to the temple. Now look at verse 20 to 24. And when ye shall see Jerusalem compassed with armies, then know that the desolation thereof is nigh. Then let them which are in Judea flee to the mountains, and let them which are in the midst of it depart out, and let not them that are in the countries enter therein. For these be the days of vengeance, that all things which are written may be fulfilled. Now, so it's going to be a picture, because not all things that are written are fulfilled in 70 AD. But you can see how this prophecy, it's an amazing prophecy in the sense that it was an impossible prophecy. Give you a few reasons for that. I've actually jumped ahead of myself here a little bit. Give me just a second here to get my bearing what I just did. Okay, I think I'm all right. Look at Revelation 11. Revelation 11, verses 1 and 2. And we find here what's going to happen in the future. It says, There was given me a reed like unto a rod, and the angel stood, saying, Arise and measure the temple of God, and the altar, and them that worship therein. But the court which is without the temple leave out, and measure it not. for it is given unto the Gentiles, and the holy city shall be tread under foot 42 months. See that? Well, that's future. We know that's written after the destruction of Jerusalem. We know that the book of Revelation was written between 91 and 98 AD, which is 20 years after the city was already destroyed and the temple destroyed. For the Gentiles to tread it underfoot, it would have to be rebuilt. So that's the reason why I say this destruction in 70 AD is going to be a picture of what's going to happen in the future, but it's amazing of how much of his prophecy comes to pass literally when discussing the city and the temple when it was sacked in 70 AD. Let me read you something here. And I had to take excerpts of this. You're familiar with Josephus. And some of that can be some pretty boring reading, so I tried to condense some things here. But his name is Titus Flavius Josephus. But he was born Yosef ben Matityahu, I guess he must be related to Netanyahu. But anyway, he was actually a commander in the Israeli army, and he fought against the Romans in the first war against them at around, he was captured in 67 AD, which is about the time Paul is in Rome pleading for his life before Caesar. Well, not pleading for his life, but telling Caesar off, you know. And what was interesting that him and 40 other men got trapped in a cave by the Roman army, who was being led by Vespasian. And they all decided to commit suicide, and they actually call this the Josephus problem, or the Josephus permutation. And they did it in threes. They count three. The third one would be executed. The second one would be carried out, and they began a series of three. And at the end, there's Josephus, who was their leader, and one other man. And they survived. I don't know why they didn't. Should have been. Well, anyway. Evidently, when it got down, when they couldn't continue the thing, and the math didn't hold out, they said, well, it must be the will of God we live. Anyway, Vespasian captures him, would have killed him, but Josephus had prophesied something about Vespasian becoming a Roman emperor. So he decided to make him his slave. So he made Josephus his slave, and then a little bit later, Titus and Josephus became close. Titus is Vespasian's son, who became emperor. And Titus is the one to besiege Jerusalem. So they kept him on as a translator. And of course, you know, he was good at writing historical facts and all that kind of thing. So that's how he came into this, and he completely and totally defected over to the Roman army. Josephus is present and is an eyewitness to what happened at Jerusalem. He's watching it happen. Okay? He also makes mention of Jesus Christ on about 3 different occasions in his Antiquities. He makes a mention of John the Baptist. Now you have a secular source that says that Jesus Christ the man existed. Not that I need it, but maybe y'all do, but I don't. But just to let you know that he was there, and he witnessed this. And here's what he says. And now a certain person came running to Titus and told him of this fire, as he was resting himself in his tent after the last battle. Whereupon he rose up in great haste, and as he was, ran to the holy house in order to have a stop put to the fire. After him followed all his commanders, and after them followed the several legions in great astonishment. So there was a great clamor and tumult raised, as was natural upon the disorderly motion of so great an army. In other words, everything went nuts. Somebody noticed that they were setting the temple on fire. Then did Caesar, both by calling to the soldiers that were fighting with a loud voice, and by giving a signal to them with his right hand, order them to quench the fire. But they did not hear what he said, though he spake so loud, having their ears already dimmed by a greater noise another way. Nor did they attend to the signal he made with his hand neither, as still some of them were distracted with fighting and others with passion. But as for the legions that came running thither, neither any persuasions nor any threatenings could restrain their violence, but each one's own passion was his commander at this time. And as they were crowding into the temple together, many of them were trampled on by one another, while a great number fell among the ruins of the cloisters. That's covered passageways that went around it, possibly making a quadrangle around the entire temple area. Those areas caught on fire first. It says, which were hot and smoking. So some of them perished just because they were filing in there and they had such violence and passion to kill these Jews and burn down this temple that they were actually causing themselves to perish. It's almost like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace. It says, and were destroyed in the same miserable way with those whom they had conquered. And when they were come near the holy house, they made as if they did not so much as hear Caesar's orders to the contrary, but they encouraged those that were before them to set it on fire. Remember, this temple is his prize. The last thing he wants is for the temple to be burned. It's the prize of a conqueror. It says, and now since Caesar was no way able to restrain the enthusiastic fury of the soldiers, and the fire proceeded on more and more, he went into the holy place of the temple with his commanders and saw it with what was in it, which he found to be far superior to what the relations of foreigners contained, and not inferior to what we ourselves boasted of and believed about it. In other words, the rumors that came from the foreigners about these Jews got this and that when he went in there was far greater than what the foreigners thought. And it was equivalent or equal to what Josephus himself is telling him what's in that temple. Now, as soon as the army had no more people to slay or to plunder, because there remained none to be the objects of their fury, for they would not have spared any had there remained any other work to be done, Caesar gave orders that they should now demolish the entire city and temple, but should leave as many of the towers standing as were of the greatest eminency, that is, Phasaelus, Hippicus, and Mariamne, I think is the name of it. And here's the reason they left a few of the towers and part of the wall. And so much of the walls enclosed the city on the west side. This wall was spared in order to afford a camp for such as were to lie in garrison, as were the towers also spared in order to demonstrate to posterity what kind of city it was, and how well fortified, which the Roman valor had subdued. But for all the rest of the wall, it was so thoroughly laid even with the ground by those that dug it up to the foundation, that there was left nothing to make those that came thither believe it had ever been inhabited. So they left a small portion of this wall, and they left a few towers in place just to show somebody, hey, there was a city here. They're like, you got to be kidding me. He left 2 legions there to dig up even to the foundation. 2 legions. He left, one of them was the 10th, may have been the 8th and 10th. I know for sure the 10th legion stayed behind. And you say, what happened? Well, when they burnt the temple, all that gold that was in there melted. And of course, the Jews were hiding stuff all the time. They were being sieged. So they plied up every rock upon another rock, getting all that gold out of there and finding out with them Jews right down to the foundations. You know who built that temple? It's called Herod's temple. You know who Herod was? He was a Roman king, a tetrarch. He was an appointed king over Israel, over Judea. It was Roman built. It was a Roman prize, and they even ordered some of the commanders that were there in theater to beat the soldiers, beat them to stop burning the temple, and they couldn't get it undone. They couldn't stop them. You see how exact that word is? Who in the world could have prophesied something like that? Who in the world could have guessed something like that? Not one rock remained upon another, just like the prophecy says. And that's why I say when we look at 70 AD, we are not looking at the end. Why? Well, there's no Antichrist there, right? I mean, unless you want to say Titus is the Antichrist. But where is the idol that's in the temple? There's no idol in the temple. So, there's no mark of the beast. Of course, all that was future at this point. It had not even been written down. It says there, and the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. Well, in my estimation, the people of the prince did come and destroy the city and the sanctuary. The prince himself might not have been. Now, when I talk about the people of the prince, we're not talking about the Lord Jesus Christ. Sir Robert Anderson wrote a book one time called The Coming Prince, and he wasn't talking about Jesus Christ neither. The Antichrist is called the Prince that shall come. And so we have the city and the sanctuary destroyed. Now, how do I know? Well, for one thing, how long has Jerusalem been trodden underfoot? Almost 1900 years, right? Since they got back on the land? About 1900 years. Don't you think that's a little longer than 42 months? Now, if Jesus Christ knows exactly that every rock's going to be pried up, do you think he's wrong about the 42 months when the Bible tells us that? I don't think so. See, there's a certain church, Roman church, isn't that interesting? That wants you to think that what happened in 70 A.D. was the completion of Daniel chapter 9. That everything that happened in 70 A.D. is the fulfillment of all the prophecies in the Bible. Because if you didn't think that, you might think they might still be involved. Which if you'll read Revelation 17:18, you'll know they are. Now, I thought I'd throw this up at you because something dawned on me one day, and it probably dawned on everybody sooner than it dawned on me, but it just dawned on me one day what this was all about. You know, I mean, this whole thing, as far as the devil's point of view, what this is all about. And when I saw that, I went, well, that's simple. All you got to do is just keep your eye on the ball. And you know how that is when you find out what the thing's really about. It's like world history. So who do you locate? Do you watch United States of America or Russia or China? No, you watch Israel. Why? Because there's a God in heaven that's watching over Israel. And you better be watching Israel. First thing I look for in the news is what's happening to Israel. Anything going on there? Because that sets the tone for everything. Now, if you don't believe that, read Isaiah chapter 40. You know what God says? He said the rest of the nations are like the dust on the scale, the drop in the bucket. They're nothing to him. Now, if that offends you, I'm sorry, but that's the truth. But he says Israel's the apple of mine eye. All right, why does Satan want to claim the temple? What is the big deal about the temple? Well, by the time he makes his little treaty, and we'll talk about that, that's coming up next, he'll already have the UN in Rome in his pocket. He'll already have the United Nations and the Vatican in his pocket, but that is not what he wants. As a matter of fact, he will throw Rome away, like it's filthy, like it's a filthy rag. He'll throw them away for what he's after. Look in Mark chapter 13, verse 1. Mark chapter 13, verse 1. And we find an interesting discourse. Now, there's only one of the disciples that continually referred to Jesus Christ as Master. Who was that? The son of perdition, Judas Iscariot. He never would call him Lord. Isn't that interesting? He always called him Master. And we know from the other accounts, the other disciples were sucked into this, which Judas often got the other disciples sucked into the argument. If you'll read through your scriptures about the alabaster box and all that. Well, he's got them sucked into this, they're wanting to show Jesus all the buildings of the temple. It says, and as he went out of the temple, one of his disciples saith unto him, Master, okay, see what manner of stones, excuse me, and what buildings are these? Jesus answering said unto him, Seest thou these great buildings? There shall not be left one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. And there's our prophecy again right there. But you see, somebody is fascinated with that temple, with those buildings. And I am telling you, that is his intent. That is his only intent. Everything else is fodder. Everything else can be thrown away and dispensed of. It's the temple. You say, why? I'm going to show you why. Turn to Isaiah chapter 14. When I saw this, it made sense. Isaiah 14, look at verse 12 and 13. Isaiah 14, verse 12 and 13. How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which didst weaken the nations? Look what happens. For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. Now here's the thing. We know from our Bible that there is a place in heaven called Mount Zion. It's in heaven. Third heaven, if you want to get particular about it. And that there are sides to that thing. And when you ascend the sides of that thing, you wind up at the very top where there is a throne. And he wanted to ascend the sides of the north. And when he said that, because that's what he did, he said it in his heart, he didn't even say it out loud. The Lord said, I heard that. So he handed him his hat and said, see ya. But guess what? There is another Mount Zion. There is another sides of the north, and there is another seat that belongs to God. And it's in a temple. And it sits on the Ark of the Covenant. And it's called the mercy seat. And it's the rightful place of Jesus Christ to sit on that seat. And he wants it. He says, I'm going to sit in your seat. You say, that's what this whole thing, that's what it is, man. He knows he's going to lose. He knows he's going to the lake of fire. But before he's done, he's going to sit in God's seat. But he won't even get to warm it up before he's ushered out of it. That's what the whole thing's about. Look with me here in Ezekiel 28. See, he failed when it came to the third heaven. He couldn't do anything. So he's doing it down here. Ezekiel 28 verse 2. This is about Lucifer. He says in verse 15, Thou wast perfect in thy ways from the day that thou wast created till iniquity is found in thee. The anointed cherub there in verse 14. Look what he says in verse 2. A lot of times when God is talking about a king or an authority, there is either an angel behind it or a cherubim or some type of angelic representation. Like you find Michael the archangel being a prince for Israel, mentioned in the book of Daniel. But look what he says here. Son of man, say unto the prince of Tyrus, Thus saith the Lord God, Because thine heart is lifted up, and thou hast said, I am a God. I sit in the seat of God in the midst of the seas. That could represent peoples and nations. Yet thou art a man. Well, doesn't the Bible say, Let him that hath wisdom count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. But thou art a man and not God, though thou set thine heart as the heart of God. Now, one other verse here. Let me find it here. 2 Thessalonians. And we find it again. Second Thessalonians chapter 2. Look at verse 3 and 4. Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he as God sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. There it is. All this political thing going on, all this conspiracy stuff, I don't care how many conspirators there are, there's one conspiracy that encapsulates the entire thing. That's why I don't waste my time on conspiracies. Because I know who the conspirator is. And there are a lot of different ones. He can use communism, he could use the Muslims, he can use any catalyst he wants to make the world look like it's upside down when he rides in here on his white horse. Do you understand that? He can do anything he wants because God's going to give him the permission to do it. So I don't know what he's going to finally use as a catalyst to catapult himself in the eyes of the world public, but it'll be incredible. You say, what's he doing? He's creating the problem so he can come in and fix the problem. Much like government employees. Them up in Washington, they create a problem, then they come through and they're going to fix the problem. Well, anyway, a good politician. So, he wants to sit in that seat, and that is his primary goal. That is what drives the devil, because there's nothing left for him. Listen, when Judas understands that Jesus Christ is not going to fight back, but submit himself to a horrible and gruesome death, man, he panics because he knows something's up. And I'm sure at that time, devil knowing Scripture as well as he does, all of a sudden Isaiah 53 starts going through his mind. He was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised for our... And then he realized. Do you know you've got Pilate's wife having a dream that says, have nothing to do with this just man? I don't believe that was of God. I believe the devil gave her that dream. Then you have them trying to call him down off the cross. If thou be the Son of God, come down. But he wouldn't come down. It's almost like there was a force there trying to get him off that cross, because I think at that point they knew. I think the devil knew. I think Judas knew. And if there would have been an OMG moment, he'd have said it. But he didn't want to give him the credit. But he's like, no. Because he lost right there. Listen, the devil doesn't lose at the second advent. He's already lost. Why? Because Jesus has taken our curse. He's taken the curse of the creation. I mean, he's paid for all of it. The devil, even though he is still the God of this world, 2 Corinthians 4:4, it's only because Jesus Christ hasn't come back and claimed it yet. He lost. He's got a few more battles to play out, but he lost the war at Calvary. He got KO'd at Calvary. And he said he made a triumph of them he made a triumph over them in it. He went down there and said, well, listen, all I know is that passage over there in the Old Testament where it says that, who is my enemy, let him draw near unto me. That puts hair on the back of my neck. Do you realize Judas is coming to him? He says, friend, wherefore art thou come? Comes up and kisses him with the kiss of death. He says, come on, kiss me. Put me to death. I mean, devil don't know it, but he's feeding right into it. He thinks he'll call down, because he's rejected, he's going to be crucified, he's going to be rejected by humanity. He'll call down those 12 legions of angels. They'll wipe everybody out, and just like in a chess game, I mean, you may not have checkmate, but a stalemate is still a win for the devil. But what happened? He went to the cross, and then everything went crazy. So Judas goes and hangs himself because he wants to duplicate what's happened at that cross. That's what I think. Then the devil, when that earthquake happened, shook him loose, and the dummy hung himself over a cliff, and down he went, and his bowels gushed out, and that was the end of him. Now that's just my interpretation. Y'all look at me like, really? Yeah, man, I think that's what's going on. Then, okay. Where am I at? What have I done? Okay, so there's two Zions. There's two Zions. And he still has one that he can ascend the sides of the north, because, listen, you always find the expression, go up to Jerusalem. Go up, no matter which direction, you go up to Jerusalem. It's on a mountain. And it's called Mount Zion. And there is a temple there, and there is a place, there is a seat there, and he will sit in that seat. That's his goal. That's everything else means nothing to him but that goal. And that's what he's going to try to accomplish here in the next few years. The next phrase there in verse 27, in the midst of the week, he shall cause the sacrifice and oblation to cease. You see that? Verse 27. So obviously, the temple has been rebuilt and the sacrificial system is back in place. Because how could he stop something that's not there? You know that Israel has no sacrifices going on. Why? They haven't even got an altar set up. And by the way, you can set up the altar without the temple. They did it in the book of Ezra. So they can start the sacrifices anytime they want. They just don't have the temple to complete everything about the sacrifices. I mean, you've got Old Testament saints that make a sacrifice to God in the middle of nowhere, like Abraham did and some of the others. They can make the sacrifices, they just can't apply those sacrifices and everything that God wanted them to do. But this temple is definitely rebuilt because he puts a stop to the sacrifices and oblations. Now, the temple plans. Man, I'm out of time. I'm out of time. I'll stop right there.